Of square pegs and round holes. People have always asked me the same question, or more accurately, they've used a pretense to dismiss what matters most. Why does logic even matter? Among Christians, the variant becomes, why does logic matter, since the gospel is what's really important? This question refutes itself. Anyone who attempts to disprove the importance of logic must invoke logic's rules to do so. Premise 1. The gospel is important. Conclusion. Therefore, logic is not. This is nonsense. The question is not do we use logic, but how well or how poorly do we use logic. Therefore, I propose a different frame. Premise 1. Since we must use logic as inevitably as we must breathe. Premise 2. Since it is better to do a thing well rather than to do it poorly. Conclusion. Therefore, we should use logic well. Paul saw this tension 2,000 years ago. For Jews demand signs and Greeks seek wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and folly to Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. To the Jews seeking a sign, Jesus brought signs and wonders. To the Greeks seeking wisdom, Jesus is the eternal logic of God. But to modern Americans, who are off somewhere having a feeling about themselves, Jesus calls them to contrition, repentance, humility, poverty of spirit. Admittedly, Jesus has a way of presenting himself to each of these cultures which shatters and disperses their preconceptions about Messiah and the unmoved mover. Nevertheless, there remained within both the Jewish and Greek worldviews a point of contact for the gospel to touch, take hold, and transform the hearer. When we move in a world without wisdom, our gospel, admittedly all-important, slides off the mind like so much water off a duck's back. This is like the parable of the sower, in which the seed fell upon the path and birds came and immediately stole it away. The work we do here at Apostoic is foundational work, preparatory work. We seek to plow and harrow so that our gospel might yield 30 and 60 and 100-fold. Admittedly, the gospel can do much in its own right to restructure a broken mind, but when the damage is as pervasive as what we see in America today, Apostoic employs very targeted remediation. Thinking is important. If no rational wind has come to dry out the deluge of feelings and relativism, our gospel is like Noah's dove finding no place to rest. And if the gospel is a square peg, the mind of our culture is a round hole. There's little to no place in the postmodern mind for the claims of the gospel to even make sense. Faced with this dilemma, we can proceed in true Neanderthal-fashion to press our square peg harder into the round hole. However, we cannot succeed without damage to either the peg or the hole, and what kind of success is that? At Apostoic, we enter this conversation with rasps and files to give corners to the round holes. And like the rasp, we may sound annoying, but it is not the nature of a challenge to be pleasant. Normal humans grow over time in their understanding of their faith. Therefore, Apostoic sees knowledge and logic as nurturing to faith. Likewise, where knowledge and logic are lacking, deformed, dysfunctional, we shall often find those same defects in the accompanying faith. When some argue logic isn't important, only the gospel, to me that sounds like reading isn't important, only the gospel. As surely as you need reading to decode the letters on the page, you need logic to understand the meaning of the sentences you just read. And when your mind is trained in logic, life becomes more contented. You stop being tossed by every cultural wind. You make wiser decisions in parenting, work, and relationships. You become resilient against the lie that diversity is our strength, when incompatible people are forced together. More importantly, you become a more effective witness because the gospel now makes sense to people whose minds have been gently reshaped by the tools you've used. In this way, Apostoic contributes to the formation of thoughtful Christians who are better equipped not only to live faithfully, but also to commend the faith intelligibly to others. When individuals discover resources that address real intellectual and spiritual obstacles, they naturally share them within their circle, strengthening the broader community of believers. That's why Apostoic integrates biblical truth and virtues, self-control, and the calm discipline that refuses emotional reactionism. Our parables expose distraction tactics, anger cycles, and forced speech folly. Our Logic Slap app arms everyday believers with quick, memorable ways to restore reason in conversations. Every essay, every series on self-control from Man of Steel, every homily on filling time with good works is designed to turn the soil of the postmodern relativism so that the gospel can finally find a place to grow. The gospel remains the power of God for salvation, yet in a time when many minds have been shaped by habits hostile to reasoned faith, the preparatory work of clearing and tilling the intellectual soil is both urgent and necessary. Apostoic exists to support this essential task. Premise 1. Since the gospel is all important. Premise 2. Since the gospel is expressed in propositional truth statements. Conclusion. Therefore, we need logic to understand the gospel we preach. This video is brought to you by Logic Slap, a practical aid to logical taxonomy for all you peasants who can't be bothered to memorize it.